Why is it that in a world flooded with wealth, armed to the teeth with advanced weaponry, and driven by powerful alliances, one nation under siege for decades still stands tall, proud, and defiant? Why has Iran, despite the pressure of the entire world, not only survived, but emerged as a symbol of resistance and dignity in the eyes of millions? It's not oil, it's not missiles, it's not just politics. There's something deeper, something spiritual, something unshakable. True strength, as taught by the Quran and lived by the prophets, is not about how loud you can shout or how much land you can occupy. It's about how firmly you stand when everything is trying to knock you down. And when we look at Iran, we don't see a superpower in the conventional sense. We see a nation that has understood the real definition of power, the strength of the soul, the resilience of belief, the fire of vision. The world measures strength by how many friends a nation has in high places. But Iran doesn't wait for approval. It never asks for permission to exist on its own terms. While others chase after influence by imitation, Iran remains rooted, anchored. Its strength comes from within, from a spiritual core that tells its people, your value is not measured by what others say you are, but by how tightly you cling to your purpose when it's being stripped away in the face of war, sanctions, threats, and global hostility. The Iranian people did not panic. They did not fall apart. Instead, they turned inward and asked themselves, what do we believe in? What are we willing to endure? And who are we without the world's applause? That inner questioning led to something rare, national clarity. Most countries change with the winds of public opinion, adjusting their values to stay relevant. But Iran chose something different. It chose conviction over convenience, vision over popularity. And in doing so, it built something far more enduring than economic growth or military alliances. It built a culture of inner strength. This strength does not wave flags or boast online. It is silent, unshakable. It's found in the determination of the mother raising her child to love faith over fashion, in the scholar who chooses knowledge over wealth, in the soldier who walks willingly to the border, knowing that sacrifice today protects belief tomorrow. This is not blind patriotism. This is a deep spiritual consciousness that sees struggle not as misfortune, but as opportunity, a divine test. The Quran repeatedly reminds us, do you think you will enter paradise without being tested like those before you? Iran lives this verse. Its people walk through fire because they believe. The path leads to something greater than this world, and that belief, that Iman, is what makes them so strong. The world sees rockets and debates politics, but the real strength of Iran lies not in what it shows, but in what it endures. At the heart of that strength lies something even more important. Faith. Not faith in slogans or symbols, but living, breathing faith that shapes laws, schools, families, and dreams. In most countries, Islam is personal, confined to homes, or limited to mosques. But in Iran, Islam is public. It is the compass of the nation. From the way justice is defined to how leaders are chosen, the country has built its identity around a belief that Islam is not a private affair. It is the very reason for existence. This doesn't mean perfection. It means direction. Even when mistakes are made, the system knows where it's trying to go. And that destination is rooted in the values of the Quran, the legacy of the Prophet, Tan, and the message of Karbala. In a world where morality is often traded for profit, Iran insists that governance must be accountable before Allah, that culture must protect the soul, and not just entertain the senses. That media must uplift the people, not manipulate them.
Oh.
This vision, though often misunderstood, gives the nation its backbone. Faith, when tied to purpose, becomes a force that drives civilizations. And in Iran, that faith is not just a spiritual idea. It's the living pulse of the nation. This is why, despite decades of isolation, Iran continues to rise. While some may laugh at their dress code or criticize their policies, what cannot be mocked is their consistency. That consistency comes from knowing who they are. A nation unsure of itself bends under pressure, but a nation that builds every institution, every classroom, and every street upon a shared spiritual vision becomes something the world cannot easily shake. Children are taught to believe not just in Allah, but in responsibility to a legacy. Youth are encouraged to see their role not as passive consumers, but as defenders of a mission. And adults understand that their hardships have meaning. Not because suffering is glorious, but because sacrifice has purpose. It's this alignment between belief and action that makes Iran uniquely strong. Its faith is not a weekend identity, it is a full-time reality. The call to prayer isn't just heard, it's lived. Islamic holidays are not just days off, they're moments of national soul-searching, and the remembrance of martyrs is not about death, but about life lived with courage. When faith is the foundation of a people, they do not beg for dignity, they live it. They don't wait for rescue, they walk through hardship with eyes fixed on something eternal. This is the essence of Iran's strength. Not just its ability to resist the world, but its refusal to forget why it exists in the first place. And in that clarity, it has become not only a nation, but a mirror. A mirror that reflects to the rest of the Ummah what happens when a people decide to live not for comfort, but for conviction. They tried to break Iran, not once, not twice, but relentlessly, year after year, administration after administration, economic sanctions that would have collapsed lesser nations, a brutal war in the 1980s that left hundreds of thousands dead, international isolation, cyber attacks, psychological operations, sabotage, internal unrest, smear campaigns. And yet every time the dust settled, Iran was still standing. Not only standing, but walking forward, stronger, wiser, more determined. This is the kind of resilience that can't be built in laboratories or bought with foreign investment. It's the kind that is earned in the fire of hardship. And Iran didn't just survive the fire, it became forged by it. In the Islamic tradition, trials are not punishments. They are purification. The Prophet endured mockery, exile, and assassination attempts. His companions were tortured, starved, killed, but their endurance lit the world with truth. Iran has taken this lesson and carved it into its DNA. It doesn't treat adversity as a curse. It treats it as a call to resist, a call to adapt, a call to rise above. When the doors of global trade slammed shut, Iran didn't collapse. It innovated, didn't sit idle waiting for pity. It invested in self-reliance, trained its own scientists, built its own medicine, grew its own food. When aircraft parts were denied, engineers reverse-engineered them. When banking access was cut off, Iran developed internal solutions. When cultural programs were blocked, local filmmakers, artists, and authors created content that inspired pride, not dependence. Every obstacle became a lesson. Every challenge became a teacher. This mindset of turning wounds into weapons and pressure into purpose is rare. In fact, it's what separates powerful nations from powerful people. Nations may fall when cut off from the world, but people with vision and iman, they rise even when the world turns its back. This is why Iranian resilience goes far beyond politics or policies. It is spiritual, it is mental, it is deeply human. In the village farmer who chooses to grow local crops so his community isn't starved by sanctions. In the university student who pursues engineering because he wants to serve the UMA without relying on foreign tools. In the mother who teaches her child that their strength is not measured by comfort but by courage. The whole society is shaped around the idea that pressure is not permission to give up, it's permission to go deeper. This resilience makes Iran incredibly difficult to destabilize. It means that even when the world thinks the country is on the verge of breaking, what's actually happening beneath the surface is growth. It's quiet, steady, determined, like roots growing in silence before a tree breaks through stone. The West measures success by GDP or alliances. But Iran has shown that the real wealth of a nation lies in its people's ability to suffer with purpose and to create without applause. It is not a miracle. It's a mindset, one that says, we may bleed, but we don't beg. We may struggle, but we don't surrender. And this is the kind of strength that no empire can easily crush. But what gives people the ability to embrace this kind of hardship? What fuels a society to walk towards sacrifice instead of running from it? The answer is one word: Karbala. The memory of Imam Hussein, standing on the plains of Karbala with his small band of loyal followers facing an army of thousands knowing they would be killed, but choosing to stand anyway. That story is not just a religious ritual in Iran, it is the spiritual heartbeat of the people. It is taught not as history, but as identity. The idea that the greatest honor is not in surviving, but in dying with dignity. In living for truth even when truth is costly. Iran's people have grown up with. This narrative, Ashura, is not just a day off. It is a nationwide moment of soul-checking, a reminder that sacrifice is sacred. That giving your life for your principles is not a loss. It is the ultimate gain. So when hardship comes, the people already know the script. They don't panic. They reflect, remember, and they act. This culture of sacrifice can be seen in every layer of society. In the soldier who volunteers for the front lines, not because he seeks war, but because he seeks to protect his people's independence. In the scientist who could have fled abroad for better opportunities but chooses to stay and build something for her nation, even with limited resources. In the businessman who accepts financial loss rather than participate in a system that compromises Islamic values. This willingness to suffer for something greater has created a kind of invincibility, not physical, but moral. And moral invincibility is far more dangerous to oppressors because you cannot buy off someone who sees suffering as noble. You cannot threaten someone who already accepts death as a possibility in the path of righteousness. You cannot manipulate a people who already believe that reward lies with Allah, not the world. Sacrifice in Iran is not random, it is focused. It's connected to a national vision that has spiritual depth. It's not about dying for the sake of nationalism. It's about living and dying for a set of values rooted in Tot, justice, and resistance. It's why even during economic hardship, people gather in the millions for religious processions. Why entire cities will shut down not to celebrate but to mourn, to weep, to reflect. Because in those tears there is strength, in that pain there is clarity. They do not worship suffering, but they embrace the reality that this world was never meant to be easy for those who speak the truth. They understand that comfort is temporary, but honor lasts forever. This spiritual clarity is what elevates sacrifice into something beautiful. And when a nation sees beauty in its struggle, no amount of pressure, propaganda, or punishment can strip it of its pride. Iran has taught the world that strength is not the absence of pain, it's the ability to carry it with purpose. And that is a kind of strength no weapon can defeat. When a nation forgets who it is, no amount of wealth or weapons can save it. Identity is not just a cultural accessory. It is the soul of a people. Strip that away, and what's left is an empty shell that mimics others, chases trends, and loses itself in the chaos of the modern world. But Iran never forgot. While many countries in the Muslim world struggled to balance their Islamic values with Western pressure, Iran refused to compromise its identity for the sake of fitting in. It didn't blend. It stood apart. Even when mocked, even when threatened, even when isolated. And that choice to remain rooted when others drifted became one of its greatest sources of strength. From the clothing of its women to the architecture of its cities, from its media to its education system, Iran has made it clear. We are not a copy. We are not an imitation. We are the continuation of a civilization, of a faith, of a mission that began with the call of Laha Allah. The hijab is not just a piece of cloth. It is a statement, a declaration of defiance against the global obsession with reducing women to products. The Aden is not just a sound. It is the heartbeat of a people who remember Allah 5 times a day, no matter how modern the world becomes. Iran's calendar is filled not with meaningless holidays, but with days that commemorate sacrifice, justice, knowledge, and resistance. These are not random choices. They are deliberate markers of identity. In a time where many Muslim countries feel pressured to secularize their image to gain approval from global powers, Iran has instead doubled down on its Islamic and cultural legacy, not to become arrogant, but to remain authentic. And authenticity is powerful because when a people are confident in who they are, they do not look to others for validation. They don't shift with every wave of opinion. They become like mountains, still solid and immovable. This deep sense of identity has created a nation that doesn't just survive external attacks, it thrives under them. Because every attempt to erase them only reminds them of what they must protect. Iran's identity isn't fragile. It's been tested in fire and proven unshakable. It is carried in the rhythm of Farsi poetry that blends mysticism with rebellion, in the melodies of traditional music that echo both longing and faith, in the literature, art, cinema, and public discourse that constantly reflect Islamic values and national dignity. Children in Iran grow up hearing the stories of prophets and martyrs, of kings and revolutionaries, not as fairy tales, but as blueprints. They are told, "This is who you are. This is the blood in your veins. This is your legacy to guard." In a world suffering from cultural amnesia, Iran remembers, and it's not just about remembering the past. It's about shaping the future. That's where education comes in, not as a system to produce obedient workers, but as a force to produce powerful minds. Iran didn't wait for the West to educate its people. It took matters into its own hands. Built universities that rival global institutions. It developed programs in theology, engineering, medicine, philosophy, and nuclear physics. And all of this was done not in times of peace and luxury, but during war, sanctions, and isolation. The world tried to starve Iran's growth. Instead, it sparked a hunger for knowledge, not just any knowledge, useful knowledge, knowledge that serves the people, that uplifts the Ummah, that protects the country's independence. This is the revival of the Islamic tradition of seeking ilm as a form of worship, as a form of jihad. Iranian scholars, students, and scientists are not disconnected from their faith. They see their education as a way to serve Allah, to defend their country, and to contribute to the strength of Islam. This mindset has produced a new generation of thinkers, men and women who are grounded in Islamic values, but not afraid to engage with modern science and philosophy. In fact, Iran has produced some of the most cutting-edge research in fields like medicine, robotics, nanotechnology, and nuclear energy, all under immense restrictions. When the world said you cannot, Iran said with the help of Allah, we will, and it did. It trained its own doctors when medical supplies were blocked. It developed its own vaccines when others refused to share. It built its own satellites, its own defense systems, its own universities, not out of pride, but out of necessity, because it understood that dependency is a form of weakness. And a truly independent nation must think for itself, learn for itself, and teach its children to never bow to anyone but their creator. What's even more remarkable is how Iran integrates its religious and scientific institutions. Are not just places where old men debate theology, they are vibrant centers of thought, constantly engaging with the challenges of the modern world. Scholars are trained not just in tafsir and fiqh, but in ethics, philosophy, international politics, and technology. They are taught how to apply Islamic principles to new questions, how to speak to a generation surrounded by global distractions, how to defend the faith with reason, not just emotion. And that's why young people in Iran don't just memorize religion. They understand it, they debate it, they internalize it. And that kind of faith, the kind that thinks, is impossible to manipulate. Iran's investment in education has made it harder for enemies to conquer its mind. And when the mind is protected, the body can resist. The Iranian people know their history, they know their theology, they know their politics, they know the schemes that have been used for centuries to divide and conquer Muslim lands. And so they stay alert, awake, aware. This educational strength becomes a kind of armor. It guards the soul, strengthens the heart. It prepares the next generation not just to live, but to lead, to think for themselves, to fight for their values, and to carry the flame of knowledge that once made the Islamic world the center of the intellectual universe. While many nations rely on importing experts, Iran is producing them, while others build beautiful schools with empty content. Iran fills modest classrooms with minds that know why they are learning. And when people know why, they become unstoppable. Because then learning isn't just for a paycheck. It's for the sake of Allah, for the strength of the Ummah, for the protection of truth in a world addicted to falsehood. That's the kind of education that changes history. It's the kind of mindset that cannot be colonized. And that is one more reason why Iran stands as one of the strongest Islamic nations in the modern world. Because its people know who they are, and they know what they know. Unity is not the absence of disagreement. It is the presence of a higher cause that binds people together when it matters most. In Iran, you will find debates, political divisions, social protests, and a wide range of voices. But beneath all the noise lies something powerful. A collective understanding that when the identity of the nation is threatened, when the values of the people are under attack, unity is no longer a choice. It's a duty. This doesn't come from slogans or forced patriotism. It comes from decades of shared struggle, shared memory, and shared sacrifice. The Iranian people have lived through war, revolution, assassination, and economic isolation. These experiences haven't fractured them. They've fused them into something that's hard to break. Every family has been touched by hardship. Every neighborhood has a martyr shrined. Every school teaches the stories of those who stood firm in the darkest of times. So when trouble approaches, Iranians don't ask, "What do we want?" They ask, "What do we stand for?" And that question brings them together in ways outsiders cannot understand. There is a deep-rooted culture of solidarity that pulses through Iranian society. During times of war, farmers donated crops to feed soldiers. During sanctions, neighbors helped one another survive inflation and shortages. When earthquakes struck, people rushed, not just from next door, but from the next province, to help rebuild. And when the global stage attempts to isolate Iran politically or economically, the people respond by tightening their bonds. Unity in Iran isn't just emotional, it's strategic. It's what makes the country so difficult to destabilize because even when there are internal challenges, there's a line that cannot be crossed. A moment when opposition becomes loyalty, not to a party, but to a principle. That principle is this. We may argue about our differences, but when the soul of our nation is under siege, we stand as one. You see this unity during national mourning? Periods when millions move as one body in remembrance of their martyrs. You see it when sanctions hit and families refuse to turn on each other, instead choosing to tighten their belts together. You see it when political crises erupt, but foreign powers are told clearly, "This is our house. You don't get to walk in." And what's extraordinary is that this unity isn't imposed by fear. It's cultivated through memory and belief. Children are taught the story of Karbala, not just to cry, but to understand what it means to be loyal to something bigger than yourself. Mosques don't just preach sermons. They host food drives, community aid, and gatherings where differences are dissolved by the bonds of faith. This is how Iran has created a people who may disagree on policies, but never on purpose. And that shared purpose becomes a shield stronger than steel. This internal unity has allowed Iran to pursue something else that many Muslim nations struggle with: regional influence without dependence. Iran doesn't build relationships because it's desperate for allies. It builds them because it believes. In vision, in shared struggle, in resisting oppression beyond its own borders. That's why its influence stretches far beyond its land. While other nations rent loyalty with dollars, Iran builds bonds with ideology. It supports movements that echo its call for dignity, justice, and resistance. From Lebanon to Iraq, from Syria to Yemen, its presence is not just through embassies or deals. It's through relationships with groups who believe in standing against tyranny. These partnerships weren't created in boardrooms. They were forged in trenches, in hardship, and shared pain. Iran didn't wait to be invited to global tables. It created its own, filled it with the oppressed, the forgotten, the silenced, and said, "Together, we will speak." This strategic outreach is not about conquest. It's about presence. It's about ensuring that Iran is not isolated, that its message continues to spread, that it cannot be cornered by hostile powers without triggering a wider wave of response. And it's done not only through politics or military means, but through culture, scholarship, and humanitarian support. Iranian clerics travel to teach. Iranian media speaks to millions across borders. Iranian aid reaches places where others fear to go. This isn't about soft power. It's about shared power. Iran has taught the world that even under siege, you can shape your region if you have conviction, patience, and a plan that looks generations ahead. Iran's influence also comes from its refusal to be used. It doesn't allow foreign bases to dictate its security, doesn't outsource its defense, doesn't wait for someone else to solve its problems. Instead, it teaches others to be independent. And in doing so, it multiplies its strength without stretching itself thin. Because influence built on ideology doesn't fade when economies crash. It lives in the hearts of people. And this has made Iran a regional force that cannot be ignored. Even those who oppose it must factor it into every decision. They may dislike it, but they cannot deny it because Iran has turned its hardships into alliances, its scars into strategy, and its borders into bridges. This approach has given Iran something rare in today's fractured world, a network of solidarity, not just with governments, but with people. People who see Iran as more than a country. They see it as a symbol that says even when the world turns against you, you can still rise, so you can still resist, you can still matter. And that kind of influence, the kind built on shared suffering and shared faith, is not easily shaken. It's not dependent on elections. It's not tied to oil prices. It lives in the soul of the oppressed. And when a nation becomes a voice for those souls, it becomes larger than its borders. It becomes a movement, a message, a force. That is the true measure of strategic strength, not just how much you control, but how deeply you inspire. And Iran has inspired millions, not with promises of comfort, but with the courage to live and die for something greater. That is why its unity cannot be broken and its influence cannot be erased. What makes a nation impossible to conquer? Makes a people rise again and again, no matter how many times they are knocked down. It's not just weapons or politics, it's spirit. An invisible force that lives in the hearts of the people, passed from generation to generation, deeper than laws, older than borders. Iran is not strong because of one leader or one policy. It is strong because it carries a spirit that refuses to die, spirit rooted in centuries of history. Revolution, poetry, martyrdom, and the unshakable conviction that life must be lived with dignity, even if it comes at a cost. This spirit is what makes Iran walk through fire and come out with its identity untouched. You can sanction an economy, isolate a regime, block trade, attack from all sides. But how do you sanction the soul of a nation? How do you erase the memory of Karbala from the people's hearts? How do you convince someone to surrender when they've been raised to believe that resistance is worship? In Iran, that spirit is everywhere. The calligraphy that adorns the walls of homes and mosques, echoing verses of the Quran and lines of Persian poetry that speak of struggle, hope, and divine justice. In the songs sung during Muharram, where the names of Imam Hussein and Abbas stir the hearts of even the youngest children, in the worn-out shoes of pilgrims who walk for days to honor the martyrs, these are not shallow symbols. They are fuel. They keep the fire burning. This is why Iran is not just a country. It is a living story that continues to inspire not only its own people, but Muslims across the world. A story where the weak defeat the strong, where the truth stands firm even when surrounded by lies, where martyrdom is not an end, but a beginning. The Iranian spirit is not something taught only in classrooms. It is absorbed from the air, the rituals, the daily lives of the people. It's in the mother who cries, not just in sorrow, but in pride, when her son sacrifices himself defending the homeland, in the shopkeeper who refuses to raise prices during hardship because his ethics matter more than profit, in the teacher who tells his students that their ancestors stood against tyranny and that now it's their turn. This spiritual inheritance gives every person, no matter how humble, a sense of purpose, and purpose makes people powerful. When you believe your suffering has meaning, you can endure anything. When you believe you're a part of a divine narrative, you walk differently, you live differently, you die differently, and the enemy sees it. They see that no matter how much they isolate Iran, they cannot dim its light because that light is lit from within, from a place they cannot reach. This spiritual identity also creates community. In a world drowning in individualism and self-interest, Iran remains rooted in collective strength. People gather, they mourn together, celebrate together, march together, pray together. And through this togetherness, they remember we are not alone. Millions share this pain, this hope, this mission. Mosques are not just for prayer. They are for organizing, for supporting the poor, for teaching the young. Every religious ritual becomes a renewal of unity, a reminder that they are all walking the same path, facing the same enemy, holding the same banner of truth. This unity of spirit is a fortress stronger than concrete, and it extends beyond Iran's borders. When Muslims in Palestine cry out for help, when the oppressed in Yemen suffer under siege, when injustice spreads across the region, Iran is not silent. It responds not just with words, but with action, because that spirit tells them, your pain is our pain, your fight is our fight. And perhaps the most powerful element of Iran's strength is that it is not just surviving. It is surviving. With a mission, many countries exist just to exist. Their only goal is survival, economic growth, staying relevant. But Iran moves with purpose. It believes it was placed in this position in this era for a reason. It sees itself not just as a state, but as a voice, a representative, a guardian of values that much of the world has abandoned. While others chase comfort, Iran chases meaning. While others try to please superpowers, Iran tries to please its creator. This mission gives every hardship context. Every difficulty becomes a chapter in a much bigger book, a divine story of endurance, resistance, and ultimate victory. That's why the people can bear so much. That's why sanctions don't break them. Because in their minds, this is not just about economics. It's about standing for something eternal. This mission is not selfish. Iran doesn't say only us. It says all of us, the entire Ummah. It envisions a world where the oppressed are defended, where the Quran guides policy, where Islam is not just a label, but a living system of justice, mercy, and truth. And that dream, no matter how distant, keeps the people moving. That vision, no matter how costly, keeps the youth awake at night, studying, building, planning, because they know they are part of something sacred, something that began with Prophet Muhammad, and that will one day culminate with the return of Imam Mahdi, the final restorer of justice. Iran doesn't see itself as the end. It sees itself as a torchbearer until that promised future arrives. So when the world asks why Iran is strong, the answer is not found in numbers or charts. It's found in the hearts of the people who refuse to quit, in the tears of mothers who still believe, in the voices of students who still dream, in the footsteps of martyrs who still inspire. It is found in the spirit that cannot be colonized, cannot be bought, cannot be erased. Spirit that says, we do not fear being alone, we fear being unfaithful. We do not live for power. We live for purpose. And that more than anything else is what makes Iran not just strong, but unforgettable.